I am not as patient as I thought I was. Um, Definitely didn't realize how difficult it would be to have a child that maybe personalities are completely different, having to figure out how to handle that situation without just yelling and screaming. Another thing was I'm easily overstimulated these days. I never understood. I remember as a child, it'd be, 9:00 and I would come up to like get a snack or do something. And my mom would be sitting like in the living room in the dark. And I'm like, she is so weird. Like, what is she doing? As a normal child. As a mother now, I'm like, oh my God, there's nothing I more want to do than sit in a room in complete silence and just sit here and do nothing and have no one touch me or no noise or anything. And I'm like, I apologize, Mom. I thought you were weird back then, but it was not you. It was me. I didn't understand.
Yeah. You don't know until you know. That's
exactly.
Hey friends, my name is Kelly, mom of two, and the host of this podcast. Today, before we get started with our guest, I'm going to do something kind of new. I thought it would be fun to share my own I had no ideas, just kind of like in real time. So I'm going to share one today. I'm going to start it prefacing, of course, I love my kids. I feel like we always have to preface this, which is funny because duh, we all love our kids. But there you go. I love my kids. But I had no idea that I would feel so triggered by their talking sometimes. My oldest, I love her to death, but she is a chatterbox. From the second she wakes up, she's talking and talking and talking, and she doesn't stop talking until she goes to bed. And I had no idea how triggering that could be to just hear her voice sometimes when I am overstimulated and I need a break. And sometimes I go into another room and hide. Or just put on headphones or something so just don't have to hear the noise or them talking. But yeah, it's hard to even sort out your own thoughts when somebody's constantly talking to you. I never realized how much I enjoyed the quiet moments until they were gone. But I know someday that they're going to be gone, when they go off. So I'm just trying to embrace it and do my best to, not get overstimulated, which is super hard. So there's I had no idea for the week. Let me know if you have felt the same way. I'm sure I'm not alone. All right, so let's get into our guest. Today, I'm joined by Jennifer Councilor. Jenn and I actually met through high school. We went to the same high school for a while. She was in the same grade as my brother, and she also actually had my mom for a 6th grade teacher. She grew up in Michigan, and she is now living in Kentucky with her husband, Jordan, and her son, Parker, who's 5, and Jameson, who is 3. And she also has a baby girl on the way. She works in healthcare doing medical coding and auditing, but outside of work, she really enjoys sports and hanging out with her kids. She also enjoys photography, which was a passion that was inspired by losing her dad at 23 and not having many pictures of him. So she's just enjoying capturing those moments with her kids and enjoying a new hobby. So today we're going to go through her I had no ideas throughout parenthood so far. She, like many of us, has described her parenting experience as interesting, and I can't wait to dive into that more on today's episode. Oh, and be sure to stick around for next week's episode too, because we'll touch on it briefly today, but she had experience with pre-eclampsia, postpartum pre-eclampsia, and then ultimately turned into hypertension. So we're going to be diving into that more. So let's get started. All right, Jenn, thanks for joining me. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing good. How are you feeling through the pregnancy so far?
We're doing good. I am 13 weeks this week, so
nice.
Finally getting over a little bit of the initial hump, a little nausea, a lot of fatigue. We have toddlers, so a lot of that, but feeling really good. So, and very excited.
Yay, that's awesome. And you're having a baby girl, right?
We are, after 2 boys. Still trying to get it in my mind that it's actually a girl this time.
Yeah.
But we're very excited. I'm looking forward to buying some bows and some pink, which is definitely a nice change.
Yes. Hopefully she will keep them on. Mine did not at all. They were like, no part of it. Get this off.
That's what I keep
Hopefully
hearing.
You'll have better luck.
Well, the expectations are low.
Yes.
Baby number 3. Expectations are low.
Yeah. Yep. Have you ever done a podcast before?
I have not. This is the first time.
Yay!
I'm a podcast
Awesome.
listener, but never
Yeah.
been on one.
Perfect. Well, we're going to have so much fun. So
I'm looking forward to it.
yes, and I appreciate it for you coming on. So
Thank you.
okay, so with your pregnancy, your first pregnancy, how are you feeling when you found out?
There was a lot of excitement. So for me and my husband, we went off birth control, and it's one of those things you spend a lot of years thinking, okay, you miss that one pill or you don't do something timing right, you're going to get pregnant. I mean, that's what we're all told, right? And we went off birth control, not really putting, any extra effort in, and it didn't happen right away. So then we started doing the ovulation tests and doing all these other things. And finally, it took us 11 months, but it finally happened.
Oh.
So for us, it was almost unbelievable that, oh my gosh, it actually happened. We had already set up an appointment with a doctor to get help, but luckily we got to cancel that. So we were very, very excited. And we happened to find out the day before Thanksgiving, which was really special to us because we were hosting a lot of our family in our home for Thanksgiving. So we kind of got to make it a fun little surprise for the rest of the family.
Oh, cute. Were you starting to feel sick by then? Were you like Thanksgiving turkey, like... Or
no, not yet.
Okay.
Luckily, not yet. I had a couple weeks before I started to set in. So luckily it was still like, oh, yeah, I get to eat all this food and I'm eating for two, right?
Yes. Oh, that's perfect. So we all have kind of like expectations based on like TV or others' experiences and stuff. So what were your expectations going into pregnancy? Like, what did you think it was going to look like? And then how did that actually turn out for you?
Well, you kind of expect everybody kind of always feels the glow and they're feeling great and they got the cute little baby bump. And, that's always the hope. With my first pregnancy, I was really sick the first trimester. I lost 10 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I worked from home. So I was very grateful that I wasn't having to worry about sharing restrooms with anyone. But it was hard. I didn't feel great. And it lasted almost up till the 20-week point. And so luckily I got a little break, the second trimester, the happy little, cute little bump was nice. And then I had no idea what the third trimester would bring. I had, the back pain, the hip pain, you can't sleep, acid reflux. I had Tums multiple places in my home just to survive. It was hard the last several weeks, and I only made it up to 37 weeks. So I can't imagine if I would have had to go a couple more or even 3 more. It would have been a long last few weeks.
Yeah, my gosh. Oof. Yeah, doesn't it feel like you have a dragon baby inside of you or something? You're like, what? That's just so uncomfortable. That heartburn.
The heartburn. I had never really had heartburn in my life.
Neither.
And I remember being like, why is this such a problem with people? I work in healthcare.
Yes.
And I know that's a common complaint. I'm like, why do people have all these problems? Then you have it and you're like, this is miserable. I could not live with this every single day of my life. It would be terrible. Awful. And luckily mine subsided, as soon as I had the baby, but it was a long few weeks with the heartburn.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So yeah, you expect like this awesome, super cute pregnancy and then like, oh, reality.
It's not. Yeah.
Reality check.
Exactly.
I had the same experience. Oh, not fun. But then you're like thankful for it at the same time. Like,
exactly.
Especially if you have waited so long and then it finally happens, you're like grateful, but also like, this is not fun.
Exactly. It's not, I don't overly enjoy being pregnant. That's for sure. But what comes after is, it makes you forget. Like I said, I'm like getting into, some of the things and I'm like, oh, I'm going to have the heartburn again. And I'm going to be sore at nighttime. And I'm like, but I forget about it. You don't really think about it until you're in the heat of it again.
Yes. Yeah. What's your favorite part of pregnancy?
Oh, for me is the baby kicks. When those start coming in, I had to wait until 22 weeks with my first because I had an anterior placenta. And they told me it might be all the way up to like 30 weeks before you felt something. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope not. But 22 weeks for the first one, 18 weeks to the second one. And it's just, once you can feel the baby kicks, it's almost, I don't know. It's just like the sweetest thing to think of the things that they're doing in there or getting ready to come out. And it's the best part by far.
Oh yeah, definitely agree. So did you do a lot of prep during your pregnancy, like for birth?
Yeah, so I'm kind of I like to be aware of what's going on. So I read all
Yeah.
the books, different books that were recommended to me. I watched a couple documentaries on literally the pregnancy process. What happens when the eggs release all the way up till, birth. And I found it all really fascinating to see what's developing and how things are developing with the birth process. I work in healthcare, so I'm fairly aware of what goes on in it. So I've always been the kind of person that I've never been set in stone with a birth plan. I trust my doctor a lot. I know I have to be flexible. Don't get my hopes up for anything because things can change at any second. And so I did a lot of research. One of the things that I think was a big deal was I took the hospital, I guess, birthing class for the first time. And it was great because I got to see the facility where we were going to give birth at. They showed you some of the devices that might come into play. And you really got to know a few of the nursing staff. And the head OB nurse happened to be there on the day of my delivery, and she was a godsend. And so I, definitely recommend getting to know the facility you're going to be at, taking the classes they have, because there's a lot of really great information.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I can't even remember if I did like a hospital tour. I don't think I did.
Yeah. And I think ours was like, it wasn't anything special. It was like maybe 4 hours. Like you said, there was a video, one of those great videos from like the 90s of births,
Uh,
and the tour, but it was really good.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So I kind of know your story a little bit, but you developed preeclampsia during your pregnancy, correct?
Yeah, so during my first pregnancy, I had a very normal pregnancy throughout my entire pregnancy. My glucose test came back, my lab works were always coming back good. I had the normal pregnancy symptoms. I had the nausea, the vomiting in the first trimester. I was tired, all those things. I started getting some swelling probably at the end of my second trimester. I worked from home, so whenever I went into the office that I was associated with, coworkers would be like, "Oh my gosh, your feet are still swollen." And I'd be like, "Well, I am pregnant." But I
Yeah.
didn't really think much of it until later. I went in for my 37-week appointment, and sure enough, they go, "Oh, your blood pressure is a little bit high." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, it's been normal." And they're like, "Okay, well, we're going to check you again tomorrow. And if it's high again, then we'll have to talk next steps." Sure enough, I come in the next day. Blood pressure was high again. I had
Hmm.
protein in my urine the day before. And for an actual preeclampsia diagnosis, they have to have 2 high blood pressure readings in a 24-hour period. So I was officially diagnosed with preeclampsia, and it was right on my 37-week mark. So, which is considered full
Oh,
term.
okay.
And they said, "Well, we're gonna send you home, but we want you to come back to the hospital." I think it was like 2 or 3 hours later. We're gonna start the induction. You're full term, and we're going for it. I'm like, "Okay."
Whoa.
I'm like, "Well, that's a lot." So called my husband,
Whoa.
and I said, "Hey, today's the day." He goes, "What?" I go, "It's my blood pressure's high. We got to go in." And
Wow.
so it was like 4 or 5 o'clock by the time they got us all checked in the evening, and sure enough, we started the induction process.
So tell me a little bit about that. How was that induction process for you with having the preeclampsia?
So the preeclampsia, of course, they're going to check my blood pressure
Hmm.
constantly. I was set up on an automatic machine that took my blood pressure every 15 minutes. It was super obnoxious because had a warning beeping every time it was high. So it was high every single time. And so eventually, after like 12 hours, my husband finally asked the nurse to show him how to shut it off, because that's all they did was come in and shut it
Yeah.
off. So we finally learned how to do that. But it's a lot more involved than you would have in a typical induction. They will more than likely give you a magnesium drip. So if your blood pressure stays high consistently, I think I only made it 2, 3 hours before they gave me the magnesium. They said, "Blood pressure's not coming down. We got to give you the magnesium." The magnesium essentially protects your brain, trying to keep you from having seizures and doing all the bad things. And so that's not super fun. They warn you. They said, "Hey, when the magnesium hits, it's going to make you feel really sick." And they were spot on. Like within 2 minutes, I got like extremely hot. I started vomiting, and it
Wow.
lasted like 5 minutes. And that's what they had warned me. They said, "It's quick. You'll feel really bad for a few minutes, and then it will end." I've had other family members who had to have it, and they felt kind of gross the entire time on the magnesium. I personally
Hmm.
didn't. It was only that one period. But with the magnesium, they do have to monitor your urine output a lot more closely. So I got a catheter almost immediately, which one was nice for me because every time I had to get up to go to the bathroom, you have to disconnect from like a million different things, and it's such an ordeal. So that was almost a little bit of a relief. But I had to be on a catheter. I had extra IVs, so I had IVs in both arms. And the induction process for me was just a little bit slow. My cervix didn't want to dilate. They had to use all the different medications. We use a Foley balloon, which I know has given a lot of trouble for women. They say it's very painful. I personally was not bothered by it, but I did have a really great epidural through it. So when I started on a Wednesday evening, and he wasn't born until Friday right around noon. So it took several days. So it took almost a whole day just for me to like get dilated into the actual labor. And once labor started, it wasn't too bad. I got an epidural, and then I was able to sleep the last like 6 hours. And then my doctor came in, woke me up, and I was ready to push. So that part went well. It was just the first like day and a half that was the hard part. And then with the magnesium and my blood pressure, my blood pressure was pretty steady, right around the 140s over 90. It's not happy about it, but it wasn't in dangerous levels. So it was just, monitored. The magnesium required me to be on that throughout the birthing process plus 24 hours after. So I had to be in a catheter. I had to be bedbound essentially for the extra day. So for me, it was hard being bedbound for like 3 days without, being able to shower or brush my teeth and do all the things. So that was the hard part. And I was on an all liquid diet. So that was trouble.
Oh my gosh, the whole time?
The whole time. So I think they allowed me to eat dinner the night I got signed in. And that was the last meal I had before he was born. He was born right before noon. And I still say there was an angel nurse out there. She had ordered me lunch, and she had a burger ready for me as soon as like a half hour after I delivered him. I was like, they're like, here's your lunch. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. I've never been more grateful.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So that was obviously your first one. So did you have any challenges with either of the births?
Birth-wise, no. They just took a long time. My second birth, I would say, was probably slightly more challenging in the fact that my epidural didn't take. So I had maybe a couple hours where the epidural worked really well, and then essentially didn't take. So I spent the last like 6 hours of my labor with no epidural. And the problem being was I had been given an epidural. So it's not like I could get out of bed to like walk or sit on the ball or do anything that might help ease my pain. I was essentially stuck in the bed. And so that was definitely more difficult for me trying to get through that. But birthing wise, besides getting me to the point of actually being in active labor with the dilated cervix, those were the hard parts. But my birthing experiences both went pretty well. We had no major complications. I had no, emergencies or anything like that. Parker, I do remember when he came out, I have the best OB. I was pushing, and I remember she looked up and she very calmly just looked at me. She said, okay, make sure you don't push until I tell you to. And I'm like, okay, and 30 seconds later, she's like, okay, give us a good push. And I did. He popped right out. And
nice.
After he was delivered, my husband came up to me and he goes, the cord was wrapped around his neck. And I go, and those are the things that my doctor never gave me an inkling. She was so calm, and that's not typically a bad thing anymore. They know how to handle it, but I didn't have any major complications with either one. Jameson was kind of at an angle coming out during birthing. So I was having a really hard time getting him out. So we did use, what is it? Essentially, it's a suction cup they put on the baby's head. They put it on his head, and they helped pull him out because he was at an angle. He had a big old bruise and scrape down his nose where he hit the pelvic bone on the way out. Besides that, it was pretty uneventful for the births. Both different in their own rights, but I'm doing it again. So clearly didn't scare me too much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I forgot to ask, born at 37 weeks, did he have to go to NICU or anything like that?
Nope, he was really healthy. The only thing with him was his bilirubin was running high on that end. So
Gotcha.
we had to sit under the lights, I think for, it was like 8 hours or something the last day before we were discharged. That was hard on us. One, because they're so tiny and they're under these lights and they have to be naked because they have to have as much light on them as possible that's a little sad to see. And you're like, 2-day-old baby. And we very much wanted to get home. We've been at the hospital for like 5 days at that point. And so we're like, just let us go home. But that helped him. So that just had to be monitored a little bit extra closely, the first week or two after discharge, and after the, set of lights and getting the breastfeeding a little bit better after those first few days, it cleared up quickly.
Okay, so postpartum, taking Parker home, how were you feeling? What were you thinking? What was your mindset?
Well, it's one of those things that you almost can't believe that you were given this child to take home and be responsible for. And for me, that was like trying to wrap my mind around it. The first one for me was it was easy at the beginning. I was very confident in having a baby. I'd been around enough babies growing up that, I was confident. I felt like, okay, I can handle this. I know what he's going to need. My husband was home with me. My mother-in-law stayed with us for the first week, and they were, more than helpful on everything. They basically wanted me to sleep and feed the baby, and, and that was it. So I had plenty of help. It got hard probably after the first couple of weeks. I think that's when things were starting to, okay, we're not getting the sleep, and breastfeeding didn't go well for me. And so I was struggling through that. And I in my mind, I had told myself I wasn't going to put any pressure on the breastfeeding part. But I did. And so that was hard. I think it was about 2 weeks in before I finally was like, I can't do this anymore. I gave him some formula, and everyone was happier. I think he had his first really big crying fit at I think it was around 3 weeks old. And he was just crying for 45 minutes. And I did all the things. So trying to feed him. I tried to change him, and I had tried to breastfeed him and everything like that. And finally my husband's like, let's just give him some formula. He might be hungry. And sure enough, settled right down, went right to sleep. But it was one of those I don't know what to do at this point. We're trying all the things, all the positions, all the rocking, all the sushing, and it wasn't working. So that's when it got hard. Getting over that hump was okay, adding formula into our diet for us worked wonders for us and made our life much easier. It was very much I wasn't set to a strict schedule, but I'm we are going to follow the same pattern. It seemed to work for us. And so I did really well, besides, between week 2 and 4, probably with the breastfeeding struggles. I felt really good definitely during my first postpartum experience.
Oh, good. So with Jameson then for postpartum, what was your experience that time around?
Well, Jameson was definitely harder because we had a toddler. Parker was 2.5 when we brought him home. So there was an excitement for me going into the hospital with Jameson. Was harder leaving my baby and not having him with me. And so coming home was a bigger excitement because we got to see Big Brother and see the interaction. And Jameson was born in January 2021. So we all remember what that was like. So It was, I remember being, excited for maternity leave because, Parker will be in daycare. I don't have anything to worry about. Well, 2 days into back to normalcy, his daycare got shut down for COVID. I think about 2 weeks of that. And then the next 2 weeks after that, in Kentucky, we had some snowstorms that basically closed daycare for another 2 weeks. So my first month of maternity leave with Jameson was difficult. I didn't expect to have 2 at home and trying to manage that. So that was hard. That took a toll on me. Mentally, I was not as high as I was with Parker because I was just trying to survive. It was survival mode at that point, keeping everybody happy and not crying and not waking. And it was harder that time. But, like I said, my husband was great. He got out of work early when he could to come help out. But we don't live near family either. So that was, we didn't have this extra support like we would if we lived closer. So it was definitely harder the second time around. I tried again with the breastfeeding. Once again, it was essentially the same thing played out. I think I got mastitis the second time. And I was miserable for a week.
Awful.
It was terrible. So, it was definitely not as smooth. But my expectations were lower this time. I went through it once. I kind of knew, okay, things are going to be harder. It's going to be okay. You'll get through it.
Yeah. So as a whole then, for both, what surprised you the most throughout the postpartum period?
For me, it was probably the breastfeeding. I mean, you hear that it's hard, but I never expected it to be as hard as it was. I thought it would come naturally, and like we all hope, I thought it would be simple. I thought, okay, like everybody says, just make it through the first 2 weeks, let your nipples adjust, get past that, and you're home free. I didn't produce enough, and my nipples never got better. Mine, I mean, were
Yeah.
bleeding, and I was crying every time I had to feed the baby, and it wasn't good for me. So the second time around, I didn't give myself expectation. I said, we're going to try. If it doesn't work out, I think I gave it 2 weeks. Pain was awful. And I said, nope, I'm done. We're going to just pump, and we'll pump as long as it goes. And we're going to give formula. And you know what? It's better for mom to be happy and being able to survive this than the breast milk. So that was the best way to go about it. So definitely breastfeeding. Thought it would be easier, but it wasn't. That definitely takes a toll.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Same. Like I had a very similar experience with that. Oh my gosh, it was so hard. It was
hard.
Ridiculous. I was like determined. I didn't want to do the formula, but I was like on another level almost. Like I was refusing. And I don't know why. And I think because I had a little bit of postpartum anxiety.
Right.
I was just so afraid, and it sounds ridiculous, but I was so afraid that she was going to like die or something if I gave her formula. It made no sense. Or like that, like she was going to be sick or something, you know?
Right.
And I was just like, I can't do it. I can't give her formula. No, like, and it's funny. He didn't tell me this until she was probably 5 months in, I think, that one of the times that she was freaking out, and I was just like, I'd already nursed her. I already did all the things. I think it was probably within the first like week or two. And I was on the toilet trying to go number 2 because the medicine that they gave me. Yes. So painful. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well,
and I was just like, I'm trying to poop. Like, just figure it out, you know? And he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, and he was just, holding her for so long. And he finally just gave her some formula and she was fine. So when I was struggling with the breastfeeding and I had switched to exclusively pumping, and I was just like, I hate this. I hate it. I can't do it anymore. But I'm like scared because like, what if she can't handle formula? And he's like, well, by the way, I did give her formula once and I was like, what?
I tested it.
Then I was like, okay, well, that actually makes me feel better because like she didn't get sick. She didn't die. Like my crazy brain was telling me this, And I'm like, all right, let's do it then.
Right. And I'm such a control freak. For me, the hardest part about breastfeeding was not like I said, with Parker, he had that freak out, and come to find out he was just hungry because he wasn't getting enough. How was I supposed to know that? And so I enjoyed the formula because I'm like, oh, he ate 6 ounces. He ate 8 this time, or like with Jameson, I basically gave up after 2 weeks and we did pumping. Only I could at least see what he was consuming. And so for me, like I've already told myself, baby number 3, I don't even know if I'm going to try on the breast. I've gotten to the point of like, I'm okay. I'm going to maybe figure out if I can exclusively pump. Maybe I can figure out a good process and do that and maybe do a better job of getting, a volume up, because I never got a great volume with either one of the kids. So, that's the hope, but I've already told myself, whatever, take all that free formula you get from the hospital, start stocking up, you're good. It's not a big deal. Fed is best, right? We've all heard it. So it definitely doesn't matter at this point.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so what's something that you would tell a new mom that's going through postpartum? What's a piece of advice that you would give to them?
I would say, take all the help that's offered. One of the things that was really hard for me when I came home from the hospital, and I already said it once, I'm kind of control freak. I like things cleaned a certain way. I like doing things a certain way. And so I had a conversation in one of the books I read. It had told me beforehand, before you have your baby, sit your spouse down, sit your partner down, and discuss, like, okay, these are the things I'm not going to be able to do. I'm going to need some help. So I had already had that discussion. He was going to help out, doing certain household chores that I had always done. But giving away that control was really hard for me. So having my mother-in-law and my husband, basically tell me to sit there and not do anything, and they would do housework and they would change the baby and do these things. And I was like, no, I can't do that. So for me, it was really hard. The second time, it was easier because I had gotten used to it, given up that control a little bit. And it's nice, if someone offers to sit with the baby while you take a shower, take them up on it. I mean, definitely do that. If you need to talk to someone, find a friend, find another mom, find a mom group, talk to your doctor. Like, your mental health is another big aspect of, I think, motherhood that can get ignored. And we know it's being talked about more these days than it had been in the past. But, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling all these, talk to someone. There's help available. And it's one of those things that I know I ignored. I think it was probably after my second pregnancy, I definitely had a lot more anxiety. Things that didn't make me quite as anxious about motherhood before did. I don't know why, the second time around it did. And it was harder for me to get past those emotions and everything like that. So, talk to your doctor, ask for help, and get a support system. You're not on this little island by yourself. A pen pal or just something to reach out to. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned since becoming a mom. Any of my friends or anyone I know that's having a baby, I said, hey, text me anytime, like, question, give me a call. That's what I'm here for. I have no problem with it. Someone did that for me when I was pregnant the first time, and I appreciate it more than anything. So I always give that offer out to people.
Oh, that's so nice. Have you ever heard, well, I have two things. So first, what was the resource that you said just a little bit ago? You said it was like a book or something that you read about.
So
what was that?
I'm going to have to look it up for you real quick.
Yeah, no problem. I'm very curious about that. Because that sounds amazing. Like,
it was one of my favorite books. It was recommended to me by multiple people.
Wow. Okay. I wish I would have read that before. I'm the same. I struggled really with, like, letting go of doing anything. And I, like, refuse to let people help. Like, my mom was like, we could stay with you. And I was like, no, I got it. And then the second time around, I'm like, Mom, can you stay with us?
So the book that I read that was recommended to me a lot was Baby Wise.
Baby Wise.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And I guess it's called On Becoming Baby Wise. So
okay.
The majority of it is revolving around, like, kind of sleep schedule. It's not, it can be a sleep training, but essentially the basic concept behind it was, okay, make sure baby has a good feeding, and then they'll sleep good. And then when they're awake, keep them awake, early on. They're not awake much, but the early on is like, okay, the better the interaction time is, the better they'll eat, then the better they'll sleep. And you just basically get on that thing. So with both of my kids, I wasn't super strict with, everything they gave in the book. Both of my kids were sleeping through the night by like 6 months fully. Even before that was, okay, maybe we're waking up once a night, after 12 weeks. So I got very lucky with both of my kids on that. But that book was really good. I had been told it was great for sleeping information, but there was a lot more context before it, basically saying, this is what you should prepare to do. Like, have that conversation with your spouse on what you need help with.
I love that.
Took that to heart when it came to the second baby. It was like, okay, I'm going to ask you to take over a couple little more things for me when the new baby comes. And it worked wonders for us. Now I had to get over the struggle of giving it up, but it was a great resource.
That is so cool. I love that. Okay. Yeah. And then the second thing was when you had mentioned about, like, a friend, if you're, like, looking for someone, another mom, whatever. Have you ever heard of the Peanut app?
Vaguely I've heard of it.
So it's kind of like a Tinder for moms.
Okay.
So, like, you can see people in your area and, like, what you're kind of looking for in, like, a friendship and whatever. Like, I was one of the first of my friends to have kids, and I met some of my best mom friends through Peanut, and it was really cool. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because that is, like, when you don't have that to begin with, you got to find it, and
definitely.
there's really not a lot to do, like take your babies to, like,
Right.
you
And that's
know,
what's so
so
hard when they're young like
yeah.
that. Like, our kids are a little bit older now. They're involved in things. Like I've met other
Hmm.
moms through, our soccer
Right.
team and
Yeah.
everything like that. But before that, when they're babies, you don't have that. It's not like you're meeting ladies at the OB office.
Right.
And so, like I've seen, local mom groups on Facebook say, hey, I need a friend. Anybody got any kids around this age? Like, and
Yeah.
people always reach out. So like you said, that's a
That's
great,
awesome.
great thing too.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's stepping out of your comfort zone and going to, the baby reading at the library or something like that,
Hmm.
talking to the mom that you bump into at daycare all the time. It,
Yeah.
I don't love doing it myself, but
Right.
I have made some friends that way. So I definitely
Yeah.
recommend that. And the peanut app sounds phenomenal. And when you said
Yeah.
that, yeah, reminded me, I have seen it somewhere before.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a very cool app. Even more recently, I've done it because like we're homeschooling and
Yeah.
I'm like, we need other like homeschool buddies, you know,
Yep.
for play
Exactly.
dates and like doing that kind of stuff. So I got back on it recently and I'm looking in my area for like people to hang out with during the week. So,
Right.
all right. So, parenting, what was the most surprising part for you becoming a parent? Or like even now as a parent, what has been the hardest or most surprising part for you?
Well, I think the most surprising part is when I was pregnant, everybody would give you the advice of, oh gosh, you have no idea how much you're going to love this child. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I love my spouse like more than anything. Love my dog. I love my parents. Like, I don't really understand what you're saying. Um, and they're like, oh, just you wait and see. And
Mhm.
sure enough, this baby pops out looking kind of gross at first. We all have to admit that look kind of gross. And you're like, oh my God, what just happened? It's like a magic spell over you. And you're like
Mhm.
obsessed with them. Like me and my husband have a date day. We're get like 4 hours away from the kids. And what do? We spend the whole time talking about our adorable children. Like we
Yeah.
we're obsessed. And people are right. You have no idea what kind of love you're going to have for them. It's a different kind of love. Like in my mind, the only way I can think of it is they were made out of this special love, and there's no other like epitome of a way to like show that other than these children that we created. And so it's you would do anything for them, like people
Mhm.
say. I would jump in front of a bus for them, and all those,
Yeah.
and they're obsessive. They're also frustrating. There are days when you're like,
Yeah.
someone throw me in front of a bus. I need a break. Like
Yeah.
we've had those days too, more than
Yeah.
the other one probably. Um,
Mhm.
I think the toddler years are way harder than the baby years. Okay, because once they hit 2, it's out the window. It's a whole new ball game. So
Mhm.
you know, there's so many different things, and the joys are great. I mean,
Mhm.
watching your kid learn a new skill. Like Parker learned to snap the other day. He taught himself to snap, and he is like doing it all the time. He thinks it's the coolest thing. And I am like blown away that he taught himself how to snap. And I
Oh
think it's the
yeah.
coolest thing in the world, but but whatever. But
Yeah.
they're amazing, and there's so
Mhm.
many great things about them, and there's so many hard things, but it's worth
Yeah,
it.
the
That's for
toddler
sure.
years are pretty
Struggle.
shocking. I mean,
Yes.
I struggled and it was hard throughout like newborn stage
Yeah.
too,
Yes.
especially with my first. My second was a piece of cake, but
Yeah.
my first, oh my gosh, newborn life was the hardest.
Yeah.
But then I also like switched to toddler and it was just different, you know? So I feel like both, for at least for me, both were like really hard,
Yes.
but just in a different way.
Right.
Now they're
Right.
like talking back, whereas
Oh.
before they're just like screaming all the time. at
Yes,
least in at least in my
exactly.
case. But
Exactly.
yeah, it's toddler years are tough. I'm still
We're
in the toddler years, and
we're
you too, but
we're
and you're about to be
struggling.
newborn and toddler again.
I know. I'm hoping
Woo!
it's easier because he'll be close to 4. My youngest will be by
Ah,
the time
yeah.
that she's born. So I'm hoping
Okay.
that like, okay, if I'm like, hey, will you go run and get that diaper for mommy? Like that will happen this time. Before we weren't getting that
Yeah.
kind of, so I'm hoping it's a little bit easier, a little bit more excitement, that gap will make it a little bit easier. Now, when we're
Yeah.
having our bad days with the toddler, that probably won't make it easier. But
Right.
they say those like second, third, fourth children, they're resilient. They can handle it.
Right. Totally. I've definitely heard that. So what is something that having kids has taught you?
Well, it taught me that I am not as patient as I thought I was. Um, definitely didn't realize how difficult it would be to have a child that maybe personalities are completely different, and having to figure out how to handle that situation without just yelling and screaming. It's definitely come into play the last couple of years, for us in trying to see what works for us and managing emotions that I was like, where are these coming from? And working through different things. So things can be going smoothly. And then next thing someone's sleep schedule's off and we're trying to work through that. And then, then we get this illness and everybody in the house is going through that. So my patience can be low at some points. And so for me, I need to get out of the house, or I need to sit in the quiet by myself. And, another thing was, I'm easily overstimulated these days. I never understood. I remember as a child, my mom would, it'd be, 9:00 and I would come up to like get a snack or do something. And my mom would be sitting like in the living room in the dark. And I'm like, she is so weird. Like, what is she doing? As a normal child. As a mother now, I'm like, oh my God, there's nothing I more want to do than sit in a room in complete silence and just sit here and do nothing and have no one touch me or no noise or anything. And I'm like, that has never made more sense to me more than it does now. So I apologize, Mom. I thought you were weird back then, but it was not you. It was me. I didn't understand. Yeah. And it's hard to like get that out and try to like reverse those feelings. It's really difficult.
Yeah, you don't know until you know. That's
definitely exactly.
I feel you on the overstimulation and the emotions. My gosh.
Yeah.
Like earlier today, even for lunch, they wanted like these like turkey wraps or whatever. And I don't always do that, but today she wanted this and I was like, okay, we'll do this turkey wrap. So I give it to Ara and she's like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Like freaking out. Right. So I'm like, okay. So, and she's like refusing. So I take it away. And then my food.
Yeah.
Constant. Dude.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Like, you didn't want it. No, what do you want me to do? I mean,
now you want it, but like you didn't want it then, and then you give it back to her and she's like, and you're like, I don't know what to do.
It's so constant. And
kids are funny.
It's just survival mode, essentially. That's basically all we do every day, all day is survival.
100%. Okay, so we had a listener question, Adrian7659, and she wanted to know, what are some of the baby names that you have for baby girl?
Well, we do have a few names picked out, nothing set in stone except for the middle name. We do know we're going to go with Elizabeth for my mother-in-law. That's her middle name. And she's very special to me and my husband, of course. But for first names, we have it kind of, I shouldn't say narrowed down, but this is the ongoing list of names that we agree on. We have Kennedy, Blake, Presley, Collins, and Rory is the last
Those
one.
Are cute.
Well, thank you.
I love that for girls. Oh, that's so cute.
We're very excited. Now I'm kind of going. Blake is my favorite.
That is cute.
We are huge U of M fans, and for the football team, before they won the national championship this year, joked around with my husband. I said, "Hey, if they win, we should name our child Blake." It could be girl or boy after Blake Corum, their running back. So that was like a joke at the time. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, gosh, I really like that for a girl name. So it kind of stuck for us.
That's cute.
But yeah, we'll see. We still have plenty of time to get it narrowed down.
Right. Oh, that'd be so cute. Have you always wanted 3, or did you have like a number in mind of like how many kids you wanted? Or
yeah, so I always wanted 3. I only had one sibling growing up. I had a sister. And honestly, we argued a lot as sisters do. In our childhood, we became like, of course, best friends as adults. But I always wanted to know what it was like to have multiple siblings. My husband comes from a very large extended family, and I was always jealous of that. And I was always,
Okay.
I always thought, how cool is it? I love his family functions when we go, and there's so many people and so many cousins and stuff like that. So I knew I always wanted more than two. After I had two, I was like, well, do I still want three?
Yeah,
that
right.
was still always in question.
Yeah.
But it was always in my mind that it wasn't going to come out of my mind that, I want three. So
Yeah.
my husband probably would have been okay with two. And we probably would have stopped if we had had a boy and a girl, but I definitely wanted to try for a girl. And him seeing some of his friends and family with girls themselves made him really want one as well. So it worked out really well for us.
Aw. Oh, that's perfect. This concludes today's episode, but here is a sneak peek of what's coming up next time.
I didn't know anyone that had preeclampsia. I was aware of it when I work in the healthcare field. We've all seen the TV shows, Grey's Anatomy. There was a situation with preeclampsia there and the patient died. I'm recently rewatching Downton Abbey, and back in those days, that was a death sentence. So you knew that it was serious. I had a lot of swelling. I didn't, my doctor told me it was normal. It was normal, but by the time I had checked into the hospital, I was swollen. Like, I actually hate any photo of me taken because I was just like this oompa loompa. Like, I was so puffy. I was retaining so much fluid from the preeclampsia. I've learned, especially with my second pregnancy, they don't mess around with it. They take all the precautions, and any warning signs, they will do what they got to do.
Jen, thank you for this chat. It's been so awesome, and getting to like catch up. We haven't seen each other in like, I don't even know how many years, like 06 maybe.
Yeah, we don't have to tell everybody how old we are.
I know, gosh. But yeah, it was great to catch up with you, and we're gonna do another episode here in a little bit, so everybody stay tuned for that. And thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. All right, friends, if any of this has resonated with you so far, please take a moment, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, check this one out too. I think you're going to like it.